am Valorous Music Tutorials, and today I'm here to show you how to use Oki Computer 2. This is a very interesting synthesizer, but from what I can find, not very many people use it. Since through my research anyway, I was unable to find any sort of a real tutorial on this instrument basically anywhere. I literally could not find one. So I took it upon myself to learn this instrument and make a video for you guys so you can know what you're doing with this instrument. So there are three main sections. There is the oscillator section here with the morphing waves. There is the table section below with the step sequencer you see here. And there is the modulation matrix. These are the three main sections that will create your core sound, and everything else is extra. This is a fairly chaotic synthesizer, so I'm not going to show you how to make specific sounds, like getting from point A to point B, since even very minor changes can alter your entire sound. Instead, I've already created a sound, and I'm going to show you what's going on in this synthesizer to be making that sound. I'm also going to, in the description, put a download link for this preset, so if you have the full version of Reaktor, you can mess around with it yourself. Sadly, if you're using this with the Reaktor player, which you are if you got this with Complete Elements, you cannot use this preset. The Reaktor 5 player just can't do it. If you're in the full version of Reaktor 5, you can. So anyway, here is the sound that I created. It's like a really dark, grimy dubstep sound. Okay, so first, let's talk about the oscillator section up here. You may notice that there's all of these green and gray squares, and that there's this white line that's scanning through them. As it scans through them, you'll notice that the waveform in the display up here morphs. That is happening because each of these squares is assigned a waveform of its own, of which there are 50 to pick from 0 through 49. In all of these sections on the side, you can modify the waveform into a specific shape to get a specific sound you want. Now to move on to what is controlling this thing to be scanning through all of this. That would be done by the table and namely the modulation matrix. The step sequencer is controlling where this sensor is going, and the modulation matrix is what is making the step sequencer control the waveforms. As you see, there's objects on the top of the modulation matrix and object on the bottom. The top objects affect the bottom objects, and this bar here controls how much. As you can see here, I have the sequencer, this step sequencer, affecting the wave section, this waveform display, and I have it affecting it as drastically as possible. Notice what happens when I turn this bar down. The sensor is not going nearly as far, and as I turn it up, it starts to go farther. Of course, one thing I could do if I turn this down a little is I could just make these steps a bit more drastic. But that's not what I chose to do for this sound, so I'll move it back to like it was. So that's the majority of this instrument right there, but there still is a bit more to cover. I want to cover these four knobs right here, which will control how the step sequencer works. First, you have this variation knob, which once I turned this back to the center here, you may notice this working a bit more like a standard step sequencer. So what this does is it gives it sort of a jumpy, twitchy motion to how it goes through the step sequencer. I had this all the way to a left, so it's like an outright twitch at the end of the sound. Where if it's up in the center like normal, it'll sound like this. Next, you have the SM knob up here, which will control how smoothly it morphs between all of the waves you see in these squares. Right now, it's always morphing. But if I move it all the way to the end, we have the exact opposite, where it basically just immediately flips to its end destination. In the middle, it's sort of an in-between. And here's where it's always morphing. Next, there's the frequency knob, which will control how fast it goes through the step sequencer, thus how fast the sensor scans through all of these waveforms. If you're looking to make really slowly evolving sounds, turning this down is a good thing. Next, we have the length knob, which controls how many steps are in the step sequencer. I have it turned really low to only 3 steps because that's what I wanted, but you can really have quite a lot of them. Next, I want to cover the rest of the stuff on this oscillator section, namely the stuff in the blue. You have this knob here. Notice what happens when I turn this up. The sensor is now sensing the waveforms that would be in these later squares up here. I turn it up even more, and now it's sensing the squares even farther to the right. And then we just have a general distortion knob here, which gives a really good distortion characteristic to your sound. And then these buttons down here will give it a characteristic as the name explains. I thought triangle sounded best for this. And the last main thing I want to talk about now is the chorus/bit mode section. I recommend for most of these deep sounds you turn this on because the sound can be kind of thin without it. And a lot of that is controlled by the delay. I mainly want to talk about the bit section down here, though, because that's very interesting. It's, at least from what I can tell, it's basically a very controlled clipping effect. Turning this down will give the sound a very grimy, broken feel. I didn't think that was terribly great for this sound, but it can be used very effectively. And the rest of the stuff in the synthesizer is mostly pretty basic stuff. You have your filters, low pass, high pass. You have your ADSR, your LFO. Most of the other stuff in this is pretty familiar. One thing I forgot to mention on the table that I should get to now is these 2 buttons here that I want to bring up. Namely this one. This, if this is on, the sound will immediately repeat as it has been. If you turn this off, it doesn't repeat and just kind of freezes at the last step. Which can be interesting. And this will make the steps go in alignment with your beats per minute in your DAW or sequencer. Which is very useful. So that's basically everything. I didn't cover this little section here, but I'm not going to do that in this video. So with all of that said, that should give you everything you need to know about this synthesizer to get going and making sounds. As I said before, this preset will be downloadable in the description, so you can mess around with it yourself, and of course, use it in your own music if you want to. Go ahead. It's free. So, I really hope you found this useful. If you did, I would greatly appreciate it if you would like and subscribe, and check out my SoundCloud and Bandcamp to listen to some of my music that I've made. So, I hope that you found this useful, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.